No, 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 not there. Where is it? Trixie, have you seen my jacket? Should be under the fire. Oh, hello, and welcome to Fandom Fridays, where we proceed to check out all the fanfics that are not pony related. Not here either. Why? Because, look, you need to know why the pony fandom fanfics are great, and while others stink. And you kind of caught us at a bad time. What is this? I can't even make sense of this thing. Why do we even have this in this office? Because you loved it when you were 13. Yeah, when I was 13, Trix. In case you're wondering, Martial Art for Easter's high school reunion is tomorrow, and he's right now searching for all of his old stuff to make sure that he has everything ready. No. I can't believe I lost that. Trixie, have you lost? Do you know where my portfolio of all my writing accomplishments are? You don't have any writing accomplishments. Shut up. And besides, your show is starting. My show? Oh, God! Sorry about this, people. Welcome to the show. Well, I promised you yesterday, didn't I? I mean, last week, right? And here we are. The final arc of 3 New Senshi. Well, the final completed one. There's a arc 5, but it's only one chapter. But there's one last arc for you to all enjoy. So without further ado, we here at the Tree Berry Memorial Library am proud to present 3 New Senshi by Rkstriker JK5! Let's enjoy. 3 New Senshi, Episode 4, Galaxia Rocks. It has been quite some time since the Senshi had arrived. The battles have all been won, and the Jedi have now embraced their new power, their new legacy. But, somewhere in the darkness, a new evil lurks. We join our heroes at that time. Chapter 1, Absolute Power. At the center of the Milky Way, in an immense hole in space drifted, floating as light seemed to spew from its maw. It was known as the Cauldron. Life flowed from there in a never-ending wave, replacing all that decayed and died. However, the Cauldron had a secret, a terrible secret. Among the swirling energy, a dark form raised against its cage. Imagine, if you will, if evil was alive. Imagine if it had will and desire. Such a being would be chaos. It was nothing more than a formless red-tinged energy stewing in the cauldron, but it had thoughts and desires. And one of those goals was to annihilate all the good in the universe and plunge it into hell. Chaos could not act on its own, however. It needed a host body. 5 years ago, Chaos was sealed inside the body of Sarah Galaxia, one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. BOW! BOW! Sorry. More Sailor Moon crossover fics need Galaxia in them. Actually, more of the fanfics I've read need Galaxia here. It took over Galaxia and was well on its way to complete domination, until it came upon an insignificant speck known as Earth. There, Chaos was banished from Galaxia and free-sealed inside the cauldron. And there it waits, gathering its strength in order to escape. The barren planet Tau Ceti spun around its star, and only one person observed it. She had no name other than Galaxia, guardian of the Milky Way. Her scarlet eyes took in the blasted cityscape, saddening at their waste. These people couldn't have saved themselves, she thought. The civilization here had tried to achieve immortality, and had even given themselves the name Deathbusters. In the end, they tried to invade Earth and were destroyed by Saturn. In the distance, a black cloud began moving toward her. Galaxia paid it no mind until she reached something. No wind blew on this planet anymore. Her eyes widened in horror as she realized what it was. Chaos! She yelled. Sailor Moon sealed you away 5 years ago! The cloud of evil picked up speed and shot at her. I cannot be destroyed by or permanently sealed, it stated, picking up speed. Galaxia raised her right arm and shot off a blast of sapphire blue energy. The bolt, powerful enough to destroy significant portions of the galaxy, passed right through the dark cloud. I will have you, Galaxia. Galaxia opened her mouth, and the chaos surged forward, streaming into her through that opening. As chaos entered, a golden light shot out of Sensei's scarlet eyes and stopped about a meter away. It coalesced into the shiny crystal, Galaxia's starseed. It was her soul given physical form. As chaos possessed her, physical changes began manifesting itself. Galaxia's skin turned ashen. A great leathery wing sprouted from her back. Her armor turned from gold to onyx, and claws replaced her fingernails. Within seconds, chaos solidified its hold on Galaxia's body. Fast, fast, fast! Galaxia! Gorgeous! Yes, this will do, she said as she looked over her new form. Then glanced it up at the levitating starseed. A force field sprung up around the crystallized soul, and without a simple gesture, in order to oppose my will upon the universe, I must destroy the earthbound Senshi. To do this, I'll need shock troops. Galaxia knew everything about the Senshi, including former enemies that were still alive. No. Don't you even think about it, Galaxia. Don't you dare! A smile crossed her lips. You will die, Sailor Moon, and your acts of compassion will be your undoing. Galaxia's first destination was a planet in the Alpha Centauri system. Two aliens, Ali and N, lived there and had been for 9 years. Both lived in symbiosis with a large tree called the Bachaku. It provided them energy, and they tended to its needs. 9 years ago, they attempted to drain life energy from the Earth, in a misguided attempt to save the tree's life. Sailor Moon healed them and saved Makachu, allowing them to depart in peace. One of the aliens, N, sat in a field of flowers, looking up at a bright green sky. She closed her pink eyes and let the warmth of the sun dance across her green skin. Both she and Allie could be described as elf-like, with pointed ears, a slim build, and long, wavy hair. She opened her eyes and saw a demon standing before her. Dio? No, this is bad. Galaxia! Ugh. Her eyes widened in shock as she rose to her feet. What are you? Galaxia sneered. I am your new master. Anne's breath sped up as she tried to run back to Allie and the mother tree, but Galaxia raised her hands and a telekinetic barrier formed between the elf and safety. Anne ran right into the barrier and bounded off, falling to the ground with a grunt. The demon held out her right hand, and a pair of golden bracelets appeared in front of her. They flew towards Anne and climbed onto her wrists even as she struggled to her feet. She held up her arms and looked at him in confusion. What are these? Ah! A large bolt of electricity suddenly filled her body, and her mouth opened in a silent scream. After a few seconds, she collapsed to the ground. Galaxia sauntered over to her new slave, got to her feet. As long as those bracelets are on, you are my slave. Do you understand? Anne looked up at Galaxia. Her scarlet eyes were no longer shining as they once were. She seemed listless. Yes, my master. The demon looked up and saw an indistinct blur heading her way. She chuckled. Excellent. Slave number 2 is right on schedule. 2 minutes later, Galaxia, Allie, and N traveled through the galaxy. Galaxia needed no starship for interstellar travel. She simply willed herself along. Allie and N stood inside a large energy bubble that trailed behind Galaxia. Allie sported shiny gold bracelets on his wrists, and his blue eyes were as dull as N's red orbs. When chaos had possessed Galaxia, she corrupted 4 other Senshi. Tanako, Lead Crow, Aluminum Siren, and Iron Mouse had been told a simple thing: join or die. They joined and sold their souls in exchange for not being obliterated on the spot. When Sailor Moon initially sealed chaos away, she had also restored their souls and sent them back to their home planets. That's where Galaxia found them. Tanaka was the first of the 4 and was in a rather large city. Humanoids ran from her, Galaxia, but Tanaka stood firm. Cat ears jutted out between her black hair, and she wore a black sailor fuku with knee-high boots. She stared up at Galaxia and let out a laugh. I can't believe it. Chaos has you again. She bared her fangs and posed. In the name of Mao, I'll punish you! She held out her hands, and a large weapon appeared. She held it over her right shoulder and pointed at Galaxia. Nyako! Bazooka! She shouted, firing off a powerful missile. The missile screamed at Galaxia, but exploded harmlessly off her shield. The Senshi turned to En and Ally. Do it. The two elves nodded. The spear of energy they stood in vanished, and they floated down to the road where Tanako stood. En leapt at the Senshi, her fingernails extended, and raked her claws across Tanako's face. She dropped her bazooka and cried out in pain, even as dark blood seeped across the scars. Ally then held out his right hand and sent a telekinetic blast at Tanako. Talking to feel annoyed off her feet. Galaxia landed on the ground and held out an ashen-colored hand. Gallium bracelets appeared and flew to Tanako. He climbed onto her wrist and sent out a surge of electricity. The Feelanoid's body writhed in pain as her free will was subverted. After a few seconds, the Senshi stumbled to her feet. Dry blood trailed from the four scars along her face. What is your will? She asked. Galaxia smiled, baring her fangs. 1 down, 3 to go. Sailor Lead Crow watched as Galaxia's demonic form approached on wings of leather. She closed her brown eyes and sighed. So, it has begun again. She also saw Tanako and 2 aliens standing in a glass spear of energy. As she raised her weapon, shouted, You shall not take my soul, Galaxia! I have learned my lesson! She cracked her whip, and, spinning out a trail of violent electricity shooting up at Galaxia. The light of her bolt of energy splashed against Galaxia's shield, but merely dissipated. Lead Crow grated her teeth and spread her own wings out. Unlike Galaxia's, they were feathered as the birds were. She ran a bit, then leapt into the air and began flying off. Ten Nyako's bazooka materialized in her hand. She aimed a shot at Lead Crow's back. She waited a full second before squeezing off a round. The missile, intentionally not weak, hit Lead Crow square in the shoulder blades, sending her spiraling to the ground. A pair of golden bracelets followed close behind the missile and clamped around her wrists halfway to the ground. They sent out total electricity even as Lead Crow slanted into a field of grass. When Galaxia landed, Lead Crow was already standing with her left arm limply. Sarah Lead Crow looked into Galaxia's eyes. I am yours. Lead Crow slumped to the resignation and defeated as Galaxia nodded. Yes, you are mine. Now, on to Aluminum Siren. Galaxia's next stop was Planet Mermaid. 90% of it was covered in water, and the cities resembled giant seashells. The demon found his resident Senshi on the beach, munching on a donut. Aluminum Siren looked up at Galaxia and her menagerie. I'll punish you, she stuttered, while brushing a lock of cerulean hair from her eyes. Galaxia sighed as she and her arm landed. Why don't you save me the trouble and clamp my bracelets onto your wrists? Aluminum Siren blinked twice, then looked at her Lead Crow's arm. Lead Crow, what happened? She asked as she was pushed by Galaxia and hurried over to her friend. Sir Lead Crow's arm was no longer broken, but it healed incorrectly and was now twisted and useless. Tin Nyako and Ally stepped in front of the slightly dizzy Senshi before she could reach Lead Crow. However, Aluminum Siren backed up and bumped into En. Comprehension finally came to her as she closed her eyes. I submit. Galaxia nodded and telekinetically sent the bracelets over to her wrists. They clamped down and sent their customary jolt of electricity through her body as her free will was suppressed. Galaxia glanced up at the deep blue sky. Now all that's needed is the Iron Mouse, and the stellar enemies will be once more together. 5 minutes later, Galaxia arrived at Planet 2. A lone Sailor Senshi stood there, Sailor Iron Mouse. She was only half Galaxia's height, but she raised her little arms at the fallen Senshi. You won't win, Chaos, even if, or when you correct me, Sailor Moon will see you away again. Galaxia smirked. Those are small words. She raised her hands and fired off a telekinetic pulse. My Iron Mouse leapt out of the way and rolled to the right. Lead Crow suddenly ran after the Senshi. Her black wings spread out and jumped up, gliding towards Iron Mouse. She unclipped her whip from her waist and snapped at an iron mouse, catching her by the ankle and tripping her up. Galaxia took that opportunity to send a pair of gold bracelets finding an iron mouse. They clamped on and quickly drained Iron Mouse of her free will. When she finally stood up, she seemed smaller. Galaxia took a moment to survey her army. They now numbered 7, leaving them outnumbered by 4. Galaxia also knew that 3 of the Earthbound Senshi, Mercury, Pluto, and Saturn, had somehow greatly increased their strength over the past year. She needed more soldiers, and she knew where to get them. When most of the Oceania slept, they dreamed, and when they dreamed, their souls left their body and departed for a known as Elysium, the world of dreams. You could rest and relax there after the day was over. 4 beings, however, never rested. They were Helios, ruler of Elysium, and his helpers, Tiger's Eye, Fish Eye, and Hawk's Eye, otherwise known as the Amazon Trio. Martial art user, are you okay? Yeah, Trix, why?
Well, this is involving stuff from Super S. You hate Super S. You hate it with a fiery passion. The only thing you like of Super S is the manga version. I'm surprised you're not screaming or trying to run away at this moment.
You know what? This fanfic has earned my trust to this point, where he could have one of the stupidest manga in existence show up. Ah, Beelzebub. You got that right. And I wouldn't care. 6 years ago, they tried to capture Helios from their queen. Sailor Moon helped them gain souls, and Helios took them in as his helpers and guardians. Fisheye stood near one of the many lakes in Elysium inside. Sometimes his job could be so boring. He saw several people cavorting on the beaches and frolicking in the waves before an odd shadow passed on ahead. He looked up in gas as an ashen-skinned demon made a beeline for him. His blue eyes went wide in shock as he realized who or what it was.
Sailor Galaxia, that's impossible!
He let out a grand, scaly hand as the 4 throwing knives materialized in his fingers. He took a careful eye before throwing at each one. The razor-sharp daggers flew at Galaxia, and each one missed her by the mirror. Fisheye swore as Galaxia dropped to the ground. He turned to run, but something wrapped around his legs, tripping him up. He fell hard. The half-man, half-fist turned to his right and saw a woman standing there in thigh-high boots and a tight-fitting bodice. Her left arm hung uselessly to his side, but her right hand held a long whip that was curling around his ankles. He tried to get up, but an invisible force field slammed onto his back, pinning him onto the ground. You know, if Fisheye was straight, he would be so happy. Sailor's leg crow and aluminum siren advanced on Fisheye. Suddenly, a ring of fire surrounded the pair, cutting them off from the rest of Galaxia's army. 5 meters away stood 2 men, both looking more at home in a circus tent. The first one had a long wavy hair and wore a bright orange pants and white tank top. The other one had flame red hair and stood straight up and wore a violet shirt and tights. The first man, Tiger's Eye, held up a flaming wooden stick.
You ladies may be cute,
but we won't let you harm our friends. He held the lit end of the stick close to his lips and blew, sending out a long stream of flame. Hawk's Eye, meanwhile, silently uncoiled a whip and snapped it in an alley. Lulu's siren raised her hands and shouted,
Galactia Tsunami!
Streams of water shot from her palms, dousing the flames surrounding her and Lead Crow. She then turned to her friend and smiled.
Did I do good?
The every serious Lead Crow let out a growl. You did fine. Now let's get to work! Her wings twisted to the end points at Hawkeye and Tiger's Eye, and razor-sharp feathers launched from her wings, slicing into the 2 members of the Amazon Trio. Bright red blood streamed from Hawkeye's arms, while Tiger's Eye targeted and also hit. Fisheye's eyes went wide in panic as his friends went down. He rolled onto his back and untangled the whip around his legs so he could spring to his feet, only to bump into Sailor Tanaka. The cat-like Senshi placed the bazooka against Fisheye's chest and pulled the trigger, blowing him back into unconsciousness. Galaxia then sent a pair of bracelets hurtling toward him. They clamped around his wrist and sent a surge of electricity through him. Bluish-white sparks danced around his form as his free will was drained. In the distance, Tiger Eye saw his friend being slayed. "No! I won't let you do that!" he screamed. He raised his flaming stick to his lips again. Before he could launch another stream of fire, he felt something land on his arms. Glancing around, saw an almost girl-like Senshi perched on his shoulder. "What the hell?" The sailor Iron Mouse jumped up and spun around, knocking the stick out of Tiger's Eye's hand, and simultaneously nut-kicking him in the head. The trio member went down like a sack of bricks. The golden bracelet soon found himself around his wrist. Hawkeye snapped his whip as desperation mounted. The sailor animates and the alien surrounded him, dousing his whip and stinging out of range. Galaxia motioned with her right hand, and telekinetically ripped the whip out of his hand. "You're next," she said. Hawkeye glanced to her left, and saw Fish Eye and Tiger's Eye standing there with dull, vacant eyes. The young half-bird, half-man looked back at Galaxia, and felt something cold climb against his wrist. He looked down and saw two golden bracelets adorning his arms, just above his gloved hands. Electricity soon surged through his body, and he saw nothing more. Man, sucks for the animates and sucks for the trio, but you know what? Lacey hasn't gone after the sisters. I mean, if she went after the Devil Sisters, I would be ticked. I mean, really, those were some of the first foes Usagi actually redeemed, and helped cement her as why she is more worthy of the Quincyso rather than her mother, and helped establish who she was as a character and helps prove what she is. I mean, this is why that moment back in the final arc, Stars, is so good, when she reaches down, and instead of using the sword to finish her off, reaches out with her hand. It is so good, and I love it. And if she goes after the Phantom Sisters, I'm going to be mad. Galaxia arrived on Earth with her small army. They now numbered 10, but Galaxia wanted more. There were 2 more groups she could enslave, the one known as the Phantom Sisters. "Don't you dare! Don't you even think about it!" 9 years ago, they spearheaded a force from the planet Nemesis in an attempt to conquer Earth. Sailor Moon eventually healed their souls, and they took the last name Phantom. They eventually founded the second largest cosmetics firm on the planet, Phantom Inc. Don't you even think about it, Galaxia. Don't you even dare go near them! The 4 sisters were in their apartment, getting ready for work as usual. Cone and Calaveras were in the bathroom, fighting over mirror space. "I need to look gorgeous!" Cone yelled as he elbowed her elder sister in the ribs. Calaveras' brown eyes narrowed. "Why you always have to use this mirror when I want to!" she said while summoning Cone aside. Cone shrugged as he froze eyeliner. "It's not my fault you need so much time in the morning. Not all of us have natural beauty like me." She fluttered her eyelashes at Calaveras, but the elder sister grabbed a makeup pad and slammed it in Cohen's face, sending up a cloud of dust. Cohen's cheeks flushed with anger as he grabbed the tube of lipstick. "Why, you!" she screamed as she tried to draw on Calaveras' face with eyeliner. Berthier and Pez rolled their eyes as they listened to their sister's daily fight. Berthier was the second youngest of the Phantom Sisters, and the brains of the outfit. And Pez was the eldest and most dignified. Berthier looked up from the newspaper article. "I believe we should put Our Light of Bless in America. It's a real hit there." Pez nodded absentmindedly as he stood by the window, overlooking downtown Juban. She suddenly saw something, or someone, gliding toward them. "No. Don't you dare you stay away!" Berthier saw it as well. She flicked a strand of light blue hair out of her eyes and got up. "What is that?" she asked. Pez's mouth settled into a grimace. She turned out to the bathroom. "Cone! Calaveras! Get out of here!" The 2 sisters emerged. Calaveras with several red lines scrawled across her face, and Cone's cheeks and forehead caked with powder. All 4 sisters saw the approaching figure. By now, details could be made out. The creature had leathery wings and black armor. Her skin was acid gray. Berthier pursed her lips and looked at her sisters. It had been 9 years since the Phantom Sisters had needed to fight. The wars now were raised in the boardroom, not the battlefield. She cleared her throat and stated, "I believe we must retreat and contact Sailor Moon." "Oh, Galaxia, you freaking monster! They were cured! They were fixed! They have no point in this battle! You horrible, cruel, love you so much. There's a reason why you're my favorite Sailor Moon villain. I love you, gal. Good work. Calaveras, Cone, and Pets nodded. Suddenly, the balcony window opened up, and Cone leaned over and gasped as the thing landed in her kitchen. A scream escaped her throat as she raised her hands. Pets shouted, "Cone, no!" But it was too late. Cone raised her hands and shouted, "Jack, fire!" A stream of blue flame leapt from her hands and enveloped the creature. Cone's clothes also melted and reformed into her old nemesis uniform. A pink skirt with thin black lines running down it, matching pants and high-heeled shoes. A gaudy tiara also materialized on her forehead. The sapphire flames eventually faded, revealing an unhurt monster. The monster opened her mouth and spoke. "I am Sailor Galaxia. You are now mine." She raised her hands, and 4 pairs of golden bracelets materialized in front of her. Berthier's eyes went wide as he realized what they were for. "Don't let those attach to you!" she screamed. Just as a pair landed on her wrists and clinged tight. Stark terror crossed her face just before a bluish-white electricity enveloped her lithe form. Calaveras ran to her as she collapsed. But Paris stopped her with glare. "That's not Berthier anymore." Pets growled as he held up her right hand. Raven black bolts of energy danced around her clenched fist as her business suit melted away and was replaced by her old uniform. A short green skirt and blouse with black gloves and feather shoulder pads. Calaveras also transformed into her old uniform, a strapless top, red miniskirt, and high heels with calf-high leggings. She uncut the whip from the knots on her right hip and snapped it. "You won't get away!" Pets held out her hand and shouted, "Doc! Lightning!" A stream of blackest electricity streamed from her fingertips, but they hit a barrier with a full meter for Galaxia and dissipated. A sneer crossed Galaxia's lips as she waved her hand, and sent the other 3 pairs flying at Pets, Cone, and Calaveras. Meanwhile, Berthier finally got to her feet, raised her arms, and a spear of water encircled her. It dissipated after a second, leaving Berthier standing there in a blue, form-fitting one-piece uniform with thigh-high boots and elbow-length gloves. She telekinetically shoved Pets against the wall, pinning her arms up and away from the body. The elder sister struggled to escape, but she was soon hit with a gold bracelet snapped around her wrists, and it was the last thing she felt. Calaveras and Cone quickly turned and ran for the door, both knowing that Pets and Berthier were lost. Cone raced to the door and flung it open, but when she was almost on the other side, tears threatened to burst from her eyes. Sarah Nako stood in the hallway with her bazooka, aimed right at the youngest Phantom sister. While Allie and Anne stood off to the side, Cone backpedaled into the apartment straight to Calaveras. "What's it?" she said. The twin sisters tripped over themselves and landed right in front of Galaxia. The demon chuckled as the final 2 pairs clasped on the Cone and Calaveras' wrists. The 2 sisters tripped over themselves and landed right in front of Galaxia. The demon chuckled. "I got worse names for her, but unfortunately this is the T-rated stuff." As the final 2 parts clasped onto Cone and Calaveras' wrists. After a painful jolt of electricity, the last 2 sisters stood up and joined Pets and Berthier. Ted Nyako peeked in. "Are they enslaved?" Galaxia's red eyes darted over and bored into the Senshi. "Yes, they are. Now there is only one group left, and we can begin the annihilation of this planet, Sailor Senshi." Okay, we've already done animates. We've already done Allie and Anne. Who's left? I mean, if this fic wanted to be cliche, it would be the "Everybody, listen to." But nope, I have a feeling this fic is going to throw me for a loop and is going to use the Force Senshi that I wish got more screen time and its stars actually had a chance to be used with TBUSA. There was a park in the middle of downtown Tuban. Children played, elderly people sat on benches and reminisced, and 4 young women lived there, camped now beneath a little tree. They were in their early 20s and earned a living as street performance. Sarah, Fest, Jun, and Pala considered the ideal life. "Oh, Galaxia!" Give them a little break here. I mean, you're taking Team Yusa, Senshi. You are a horrible, horrible, horrible person. You're a monster. You love it, don't you? Yes, I do. They had no one to tell him what to do, and he kept all the money they earned. Sailors led Crow and Aluminum Siren and observed the two young women from a large tree as they were performing in front of the crowd. Fest was doing sleight of hand with coins, while Pala balanced herself on a large ball, switching from her left hand to right hand with little effort. The crowd would occasionally break out into applause, while Yen went into a small hat. Led Crow turned her head to her partner and spoke. Okay, these two are yours. Try not to screw it up, alright? Aluminum Siren leaned forward, almost losing her balance and slipping onto the ground. Led Crow sighed and put her right hand to her forehead. Why does Galaxia hate me so? The blue-haired Senshi had already slipped down the tree and was approaching Fest and Pala from behind. By now, the crowd was beginning to disperse, and the two former members of the Amazonas quartet gathered their belongings and money and began walking into camp.
So, how much money did we make today, huh?
Pala called out. Fest just rolled her eyes and turned to her friend. We'll know when we get home, okay? Pala's lips quivered for a moment, and tears began pouring to her eyes.
I want to know now!
She yelled, jumping up and down. A loud growl escaped from Fest's throat, but her retort was quickly forgotten as he saw someone approaching. Aluminum Siren flashed a smile at the two young women and half bowed.
Hello! I was wondering if you want to become servants of Sailor Galaxia.
She asked, straightening up and holding up her right hand, and showing off 2 pairs of golden bracelets. Fest Pala looked at her for a split second, then turned her attention back to the strange woman in front of them. Led Crow smacked her forehead in frustration, and anger built up inside her. What was she doing? The leather-clad Sailor Senshi let down the tree and ran out to Aluminum Siren. She quickly snatched the 2 pairs of bracelets from the befuddled Senshi with her good hand and stared at Aluminum Siren for a second, before turning back to Pala and Fest. It doesn't matter what you want or not! She abruptly dropped the bracelets to the ground and uncoiled her whip. You're now her slaves! Fest scowled. We won't let some stupid old hags dictate what we'll do. Pala nodded. Yeah! The young woman leapt in front and leapt over Led Crow and Aluminum Siren, landing on the tree right behind him. Fest cupped her hands together, and a red ball appeared in them. She reared back and threw it at the 2 confused Senshi. The unlikely weapon bounced off Led Crow's left arm and exploded, sending out a large cloud of gray smoke and sending it into a fit of coughs. Led Crow held her good hand over her mouth as she began flapping her wings, going to smoke away. By the time she and Aluminum Siren could see, Pala and Fest were long gone. You know, one of my biggest complaints with Super S, besides everything, is I kind of wish they had kept the part about Pala, Fest, June, and Bara being TBU's Sailor Senshi. I mean, that was part of the plot that really made it work, was that we got to see that even the asteroids could be the Senshi. And we actually got to see other Senshi, and we got to see what Chibi Yusa had to look forward to when she grew up. She would inherit her own 4th Senshi. Them. And maybe Hotaru, I'm not sure. It would have been really cool to see, and I still feel bad it doesn't happen. Pala and Fest bounded through the trees. Who were those freaks? Pala shouted. Fest turned to her young friend and shrugged even as she landed on a branch. Who knows? But I do know one thing. We can't stick around! Fest jumped into the air and soared onto the closest branch. She landed with nary a sound, but before she could take off again, 2 pairs of strong hands grabbed her from above. The spunky young woman let out a yelp before disappearing into the foliage above. Pala's head whipped around when she heard Fest cry. Her blue eyes frantically sought out her friend, but Fest was nowhere to be seen. She jumped down and landed in the dirt. Fest! Where are you? She cried. By now the sun had set, and night descended upon the park, casting everything in the darkest shadow. She backed up against a tree.
This isn't funny!
She glanced up and promptly wished she hadn't. 2 elf-like beings stood there, both with pale green skin and pointed ears. The male had piercing red eyes and matching hair, while the female's eyes and hair were blue. Allie looked over at his beloved, then down at the frightened Pala Pala. She's not bad looking. He thought to himself. Suddenly he felt a piercing gaze directed at him, and he looked up into N's scarlet orbs. What's the matter? He timidly asked. Allie, that was your first line of dialogue in this whole entire fic. I don't like you. N let a smile of malice across her face.
Oh, nothing. Does he think it's time we put the bracelets on?
Her eyebrows came down over her eyes, intensifying an already intense look of anger. Allie gulped and let down from the tree. He landed in front of Pala Pala, grabbed her wrist, and with one smooth motion, he set the open manacles onto her dainty wrists. They immediately clenched shut and glowed, sending a surge of electricity through her body. Allie let go, and the young woman slid to the ground in agony, as her free will was suppressed. N sat down beside Allie, and watched as Pala Pala slowly stopped in writhing in pain and got to her feet. Another pair dropped down from the tree. Fess was on. Pez and Calvraster had hoisted the unconscious Fess up and displayed her like a side of meat. Berthier and Cone have dealt with the other two Amazonas members, Pez coldly stated. Allie and Ed both nodded.
Then let us return to Galaxia,
the female elf said. A bright light surrounded the quartet as they teleported to Galaxia's new headquarters. On the outside, it was nothing more than the dilapidated old warehouse. You know, I bet if we remove all the old warehouses in existence, crime would drop 30%. A construction site for a new rise-hot office building sat right next to it, and the waters of Tokyo Bay rolled right on by in front. Inside, Galaxia held open court. The winged beast sat upon a golden throne. Her leathery wings were unfurled and they stuck out from her sides, while the meager light inside glinted off her polished, obsidian black armor, and turned her already acid skin into a sicklier shade. Galaxia, you're already a scary, evil, incorruptible, hateful being. Don't need to make yourself look more awesome. The sailor animus flanked her throne. Sailor Slick Crow and Aluminum Siren stood off to her left, while Tin Nyako and Iron Mouse stood on her right in honor guard position. Allie and An were directly in front and were on one knee, with Amazon Trio and Quartet flanking the Elven aliens, while the Phantom Sisters knelt right behind. Galaxia held her right arm straight out with it extended. The image of a blue-haired young woman getting into her car appeared above her clawed hand. This is Mizuno Ami, otherwise known as Sailor Mercury. Bring her to the construction site outside and kill her there. She leaned forward and the scowl crossed her already snarling fists. This will not be a mission for individual heroics. Her death and mangled corpse are the only thing that matters. Understood? Berthier rose from her position. She tossed her pale blue hair over her shoulder and let a cold smile play across her lips. I will lure her to her site. The Phantom Sister abruptly teleported out of the warehouse. Galaxia nodded as the rest of her minions stood up. Excellent. The Sailor Senshi will now know the oblivion. Excuse us. Yes, we got a problem here, Mr. Rear. What? Well, it's just that, in every single Sailor Moon crossover you've ever read, we've been the stars. Yeah, I mean, every other badly done Sailor Moon crossover ever has, just used only us as the villains. We kind of feel left out. Galaxia ignored us. Guys, is this a badly written fic? No. Am I happy? Yes. Is this well made? Yes. Is the author actually original? Yes. Then guess what, idiots? What? We're not overusing the Sentinel! It's time for Galaxia to show off what she can do. And guess what? She's a lot better villain than you guys are. Actually, she's a lot better villain than most of the Sailor Moon crossover villains I've had to read so far. So, no, we're not using you guys. Go home and party or something. Oh. Chapter 2. That old sinking feeling. Oh, you went there. A growing sense of uneasiness crept over Mizuno Ami as she stepped out of her apartment. She entered a light meditation trance, but the feeling persisted.
You're being silly, she thought. Everything's going great.
She walked over to her car, a 1998 Corolla, and got in. She put her handbag in the back seat and turned the engine over. The car started up and Ami pulled out. The radio even began playing one of her favorite songs as she reflected on the past year. 1 year ago, she, Tomoe Hotaru, Kaya Mishiru, Tenno Haruka, and Meo Setsuna had embarked on a quest to the jungle moon of Yavin 4. There, she learned the ways of the Force and became a Jedi. Haruka and Mishiru left after a bit, letting Setsuna, Hotaru, and Ami complete their training and take on the mantle of Jedi Master and Knights, respectively. Now, Ami was a first-year student at Tokyo University. Setsuna was guarding the time, and Hotaru was in high school. Theoretically, everything was going great. So, where was this bad feeling coming from? She emerged into highway traffic and reached out with the Force. Although it was summer and she had no classes, she still liked to go to the library and pulled out the old medical texts. Her danger sense suddenly flared as she tightened her grip on the steering wheel. She glanced to her left and saw someone who wasn't there a minute ago. The woman had pale blue hair tied up in an elaborate braid and wore a blue bodysuit with matching boots and gloves. Ami gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles were white.
Berthier! What are you doing here?
The second youngest of the Phantom Centers pointed to an off-ramp a kilometer ahead. Get off the highway, here, she said. Ami kept her eyes straight ahead, while she suddenly reached out with a Force and technically opened her handbag.
All right, Berthier. I won't do anything rash.
Berthier opened her eyes for a moment and smiled.
Excellent. Ah, it's so good to see you again. What have you been up to?
That shadow of a smile drifted across Ami's face as a slender rod levitated out of her bag.
I've been training,
she said through clenched teeth. An electric hum startled Berthier out of her reverie. She opened her eyes and gasped as bright blue energy blade hovered about 5 centimeters from her exposed neck.
I wouldn't move if I were you,
Ami said she took the off-ramp.
Lightsabers can slice through just about anything.
There's the Ami I know and love. You know, if this were a Von Doom fic, Ami would so be raped. A scene of sweat covered Berthier's forehead as panic set in.
How did you do that?
Ami shrugged rather nonchalantly.
I told you, I trained. Now, where do we go?
Berthier swallowed. Her forehead began to get sick with sweat.
Go down 4 blocks to the warehouse district. Pull into a construction height beside warehouse number 47.
Ami nodded and followed Berthier's directions. She pulled out to an old warehouse and dove across the front before pulling into a construction site. Vehicles and steel girders cluttered the site, while the unfinished skeleton of a new building jutted out of the ground. Ami quickly put her car in park, turned off the engine, and held out her right hand. Lightsaber floated into the palm of her hand, and she motioned for Berthier to get out. While the Phantom Sister complied, Ami reached out with the Force and quickly located Hotaru and Setsuna.
I need help at the waterfront. Come quickly!
She took in a deep breath, held out her left hand, and concentrated. A small ornate rod materialized in it. Ami held her transformation wand high and shouted 4 words she hadn't uttered in over a year.
Mercury crystal power! Make up!
10 minutes earlier. The sounds of violin music drifted through Hotaru's room like a dream, but she paid it no mind. She was too busy chatting on her summer homework and wishing she were back on Yavin 4. There, she trained as a Jedi Knight and met the guy of her dreams, Anakin Solo. She closed her violet eyes and drank in the memory of his ice-blue eyes and serious expression. A voice ringing inside her head destroyed her reverie.
I need help at the waterfront. Come quickly!
Hotaru sat straight up from her desk and gasped as she immediately recognized it as Mizuno Ami's. She got up from her desk and ran out of her room, shouting,
Haruka! Mishiru! Setsuna!
As she ran down the hallway to her house to a large ballroom. She found the elegant Mishiru playing her violin, the tomboyish Haruka playing a piano, and the mysterious Setsuna reading a book. All 3 looked at their young ward and knew something was wrong. And only Setsuna finished her training. Haruka and Mishiru were still Force sensitive and partially trained. Haruka moved to Hotaru's side and placed 2 stranded hands on Hotaru's shoulders. Hotaru, calm down. Practice those breathing exercises Luke taught us. The young woman stopped in her tracks, closed her eyes and breathed for a minute. In through the nose and out through the mouth. In through the nose and out through the mouth. Finally, she was ready.
Ani sent me a message through the Force. She's in trouble at the waterfront and needs our help.
Haruka looked back at Michiru, but the elegant lady already had her transformation wand ready. Neptune crystal power! Make up! She shouted. A tidal wave of energy melted her clothes and reformed them. A center fuku with a dark blue bow in the front, an aquamarine skirt and matching ankle boots. She posed for an imaginary camera before speaking. For love and justice, I am the pretty guardian, Sailor Neptune! Haruka shook her head before reaching into her pocket, pulled out a small communicator, but hesitated for flipping it on. Can I really disturb Mamoru, Yusaki, Rei, Makoto, and Minako? They're already leading such nice lives. She scowled, grabbed her hair as a sudden vision assaulted her, of Neptune, Saturn, and Pluto going to help Mercury, and being horrible slaughtered in the process. Hotaru and Setsuna both grabbed onto Haruka and steadied her. Haruka, what is it? The tomboy said she shook her head. I had a visit from the Force. She said to herself, I'm fine. She said to Hotaru and Setsuna, I thought we could do it alone, without the other Sailor Senshi. She held up her communicator. However, we'll need them. She finally flipped open a small round case and pushed the button inside. The device triple beat and Haruka sped into it. Sailor Senshi, one of our old enemies has returned in force. Meet us at the waterfront. Hotaru spoke up into the communicator.
In hurry!
Before Haruka could close the communicator back up, the Senshi of the wind stood straight and concentrated for a moment. Her transformation wand appeared in her right hand, and she lifted it high before shouting, Uranus Crystal Power! Make up! Sarah also had closed her eyes and concentrated. An ornate rod appeared in her right hand, and she held it up to the sky while shouting, Saturn Crystal Power! Make up! And finally, Setsuna held her right hand to the sky, summoning her transformation wand and shouting, Pluto Crystal Power! Make up! A bright light engulfed the three, fading after half a second, leaving sailors Uranus, Pluto, and Saturn in place of Haruka, Setsuna, and Hotaru, respectively. The four looked over each other before leaping into a telekinetically opening skyway in the ballroom ceiling. They landed on the roof, and Saturn's eyes half closed as he tracked Mercury's force signature. There, she said, pointing to Tokyo Bay. Neptune ran her gloved fingers through her long wavy hair and sighed. Back to the bowels of hell, isn't it? Uranus turned to her lover and stride, shaking her space sword. If it is, I can't think of better people to go with. Saturn smiled at the two and looked back to the skylight. She reached out one of the force and located 4 objects that would prove most useful. 4 cylinders levitated up and out of the house and grabbed one from midair. We'll need these. Uranus grabbed her lightsaber out of the air and thumbed the activation plate. Phew! A beam of golden energy shot forth, terminating a mirror from the hilt. It's been a while, she said just before deactivating the lightsaber and clamping it to her skirt. Are we ready? She asked. Neptune motioned to the bay. I am. Pluto nodded and grabbed her lightsaber. This will be difficult, but I think of a few people I'd rather be facing this with. Saturn nodded. Her still young face turned to stone, and her eyes were little more than chips of quartz. We must hurry. Mercury is about to be seriously outnumbered. The quintet met at Makoto's apartment, right above a bakery she owned. And Makoto had to admit, it was great to see her friends again. Yusagi, celebrating her 2-year wedding anniversary with her soulmate, Mamo-chan, sat in the living room, chatted up a storm with Rei.
Managing a household was a lot harder than I thought, but I take care of my Mamo-chan,
Yusagi said. She and her husband sat on a bench with her arms linked, while Rei occupied a chair to the couple's left. Rei took a sip of GCT and leaned back. Well, I'm glad you've matured a bit. I'm certain it's due to Mama-chan, no doubt. Yusaki's eyebrows raised up in shock at her best friend's side remark.
How dare you!
She sputtered. Rei's mouth turned up into a smirk. I dare because it's true. Got a problem with it? While Yusaki and Rei stood up, Locked eyes proceeded to shout at each other at the top of their lungs. Mamoru simply leaned back in his seat and waited for the inevitable storm to pass. Makoto and Minako, both in the kitchen behind the plaster wall, could hear the two best friends arguing.
Well, I suppose 10 minutes of peace was nice.
Minako stated as she glanced at the clock on the wall. Makoto went to a pack of rice, while Minako leaned over a computer, furiously tightly through a magazine. She suddenly let out a squeal of delight as her blue eyes landed on a particular picture. Makoto, look! The blonde turned around, grabbed Makoto by the right shoulder, spun her around, shoving the magazine in her face. They did a review of my concert! Can you believe it? Minako turned and dashed out of the kitchen, leaving a flustered Makoto alone. Or, almost alone. Two cats, one midnight black and the other almost albino white, wound their way around Makoto's slippered feet. Luna and Aramis both looked up with hungry expressions on their faces. Ugh, how's dinner coming? Aramis asked, his eyes large and pleading. On a side note, were those of you who have gotten the TBUSA SH figure art, am I the only one who finds it unfair that she doesn't have Diana with her? The Senshi of Lightning nodded as she sat at the table. Ugh, it'll be ready when it's ready, Aramis. She looked down at the white cat, right eyebrow twisting. Well, with my help, just ran into the living room. Not that she was much help to begin with. She sighed as Luna and Aramis both left them on the table. Makoto went to check up on the food, but a loud crash from the living room stalled her and drew her attention there. Wait here! She ran into the living room and saw Yusagi and Rei standing over a shattered vase while shouting up a storm. It's your fault! No way! You stuck me into the stand! Can't you grow up? You're a married woman! I am grown up! You simply can't see it! Makoto's eyes widened in destruction. She could normally keep her temper in check, but Yusagi erased destruction of that particular vase and finally snapped something inside. She marched over, grabbed both women by the collar, and slammed them into the couch. Mamo-chan quickly jumped out of the line of fire as Makoto vented. That vase you two broke was given to me by my parents! It had been in the Kino family for 9 generations! It was one of the few links I had to my family! Makoto's green eyes shined as tears began streaming from them. She breathed in and out for a few heartbeats, before turning, kneeling down and picking up several pieces. Why can't you two ever stop fighting? She whispered. Usagi's voice caught her throat. The pigtail said she wanted to say something, anything to Makoto, but she couldn't know if she could say the right words. She didn't know if there were the right words. She looked over at Mamoru, but the slightly older man closed his eyes and shook his head. She finally got up and walked stiffly over to the vase, but nearly bumped into Rei. Rei looked over at Usagi and opened her mouth, but nothing came out. They looked at each other before silently walking to Makoto, kneeling down in front of the shattered vase, helping her sort out the pieces. Makoto glanced at the two, but stayed silent. After a few minutes, the silence was broken by a sudden chirping from Usagi's purse on the sofa. Mamoru leaned over and rummaged around a bit before pulling out the slim metal vase. His manner grew dark as he opened it up, and Haruka's voice emanated from the speakers. Sailor Senshi, there's a new enemy. Head to the waterfront. Hotaru's voice had spoken again. And hurry! Mamoru looked at Usagi. The Sailor Senshi are once needed once more, he said. A fire shone in his eyes as all 4 women got to their feet, while Aramis and Luna bounded in the room. Be heard! Luna squeaked out. Usagi, everyone, you must hurry! Usagi knelt down and looked at the cat in the eyes. I don't want to fight. Can't the Sailor Senshi handle this one? Rei's head suddenly snapped up. She danced to the window in 3 long strides. Always in trouble! She yelled. Her violet eyes scanned the city of Tokyo, finally settling on a spot at the horizon. She's there! The priestess turned around, held up her right hand, and concentrated. An ornate rod materialized in her right hand, while she held it up high, shouting, Mas Christopher! Make up! Rings of fire surrounded Rei, melting her clothes and reforming him into a Sigerfuku, with a dark purple bow in front, a red skirt and matching high heels. Elbow-length gloves completed the ensemble. A half-second later, Mars appeared in Rei's place. She looked at Usagi, Mamoru, Minako, and Makoto and half shouted, What are you waiting for? Ami and the Sailor Senshi need our help! Usagi sighed.
Um, well, goodbye normal life again. Will you ever stay?
Her mind drifted to Crystal Tokyo, the city she was destined to rule in 1,000 years.
I guess not.
She stood up and unclipped a large spruce from her shirt. The cover sprang open, revealing a large crystal inside. She held it to the sky and said, "Moon Eternal! Power! Make up!" At the same time, Makoto and Minako raised their transformation wands to the sky and shouted, respectively, "Jupiter! Crystal Power! Make up! Venus! Crystal Power! Make up!" The three women were bathed in light. When it faded, Sailor's Moon, Jupiter, and Venus stood there. Mamoru had also transformed into a tuxedo mask. His castle clothes melting to reveal the tuxedo with a mask over his eyes and flowing cape. Dork! Sailor Moon pointed at the window. "We must go stop the enemy," she said. Then looked down at Luna and Artemis and ordered, "Wait here!" Luna yelled, "Wait!" But the quintet found out before they could be heard. Her head hung low. "I fear for them, Artemis. As Jason Solo would say, I have a bad feeling about this." Artemis's yellow eyes narrowed at Luna's statement. "Have faith in them, Luna. They've been in tougher spots before." A bright blue light engulfed Mizuna Ami, melting her clothes and reforming them into a sailor bluku, with bright blue bow tied in front. Maxi skirt, knee-length boots, and white elbow-length gloves completed the ensemble. "I am the pretty Sailor Soldier, Sailor Mercury!" she shouted. Her eyes had closed as she reached out with the force. A gasp escaped her lips when she felt 8 other beings scattered around the construction site. She looked over Bertha's ear.
"Why are you doing this? Weren't we friends?"
She looked at the Phantom Sister Rover and saw a pair of golden bracelets adorning her delicate wrists. Mercury's mind raced as he remembered where and when she saw a similar pair.
Sarah Galaxia used bracelets like those to control the elements. And that was the being Chaos corrupted her.
She cast her senses out again and detected something very powerful. She looked up to the top of the half-finished building and saw a demon floating there with half-wax armor, acid skin, and leathery wings. A gasp of shock escaped Mercury's lips as he recognized it.
"Sailor Galaxia!"
The fallen Senshi let out a low chuckle as she raised her arms. Both hands glowed yellow as Galaxia gathered her power. "You are the first, but you won't be the last," she taunted. Her gauntleted hands flashed, and about a dozen airsy bolts flew out at Mercury. Bertha dove out of the way, but Mercury held out her lightsaber and stood her ground. She didn't know she could stop the airsy bolts, but she had to try. No, she had to do. She rolled out of the way of the first three, brought her sapphire blade up as she got back to her feet, and deflected the next half dozen in a blur of motion. Finally, she jumped out of the last three's line of fire. She used the force to augment her leg strength and bounded up to the top of the skeletal frame. Galaxia's red eyes widened in surprise as her lips curled. "How did you do that? None of you could have deflected my attacks!" Mercury held out her lightsaber in a two-handed defensive position.
"The Force is my ally. With it, I cannot fail."
Galaxia snarled and looked back over her shoulder and down onto the building's guts. "Attack!" she shouted. Mercury saw a blur of motion as Sailor Lead Crow flew straight up and out of the interior of the building, with feathery wings flapping. Sailor Iron Mouse also jumped and leapt behind Mercury. The small Senshi landed a kick at the Senshi of the water's back, but Mercury's left hand let go of the lightsaber's grip and blocked Iron Mouse's kick with her forearm. She jumped up and tucked her legs in a somersaulting back, landing behind Iron Mouse. Light-clad Senshi had just enough time to let out a squeak before Mercury let down and lashed out with a well-placed kick to the back of her kneecap. Iron Mouse's eyes crossed as he almost tumbled off the girder he was standing on. She grabbed onto the beam at the last minute, stopping her from falling into the dirt below. Lead Crow circled around Mercury's position. She unfurled her whip and snapped it at the blue-haired genius. Mercury spun around and raised her blade high, allowing Lead Crow's whip to wave around it.
"I expected it to happen." Pluto's Time Staff and Saturn's Silence Glaive were unaffected by lightsaber plasma.
Lead Crow's eyes widened in surprise. She didn't expect her whip to get caught like that. Surprise and shock radiated off of her, and Mercury picked up on that. She turned to her off her right and calmly stepped off into space. The handle of Lead Crow's whip immediately slipped through her fingers, She tightened her grip on it, but the leather quickly tore the skin off her palm of her right hand. She cried out in pain as Mercury's descent slowed. Mercury began pumping her legs and swinging her body back and forth, gaining momentum until she swung over the hole in the middle of the building. She let go and landed on a plank and bounded inside, telekinetically unraveling the whip from her lightsaber. She let go and landed on a plank and bounded inside, telekinetically unraveling the whip from her lightsaber. Galaxia snarled and shouted, "Get her!" Lightcrow rubbed her hand against her thigh in a desperate attempt to stop the pain, while Iron Mouse leaped to her feet. Lightcrow flapped her wings and gained some altitude, then slipped down into the bowels of the building. Iron Mouse followed, hopping down. Mercury landed on the finished wooden floor and tucked into a crouch. She scanned the building with her force, finding 4 life forms below her and 4 above. All were rapidly closing in on her, but a smile lit her face as she felt 9 familiar people rapidly heading her way. She stepped forward and tugged on her right ear, causing her visor to materialize over her eyes. Mercury stepped away from the halo of light around her and into the darkness. And despite her enhanced senses, every creak and groan sent shivers down her spine. She held her lightsaber up and used it as an impromptu light. Not so much for illumination, but more to send the shadows away. She stepped forward and immediately rolled to the left, avoiding a bluish-white fireball hurled up from the lower floors. She looked down and saw the Phantom Sisters, Pets, Capitatus, Berthia, and Cohen on just the floor below. Cohen, who extended her forearm, curled her lip in a snarl. "Damn! How did you dodge all that?" Berthia cut her chin and hand thought, "She's been exhibiting some unusual powers, including telekinesis and precognition." Pets held her clubbed hand tight. Black explosive electricity ran along her arm. After a few seconds, she unlaced her hands and screamed, "Dark lightning!" Black streams of electricity erupted from her hand and crossed the distance to Mercury in an instant. She raised her lightsaber in an attempt to block them, but the lightning streamed around her blade and hair dead on. Mercury stumbled back as pain coursed through her body. She bit back a cry and attempted to use the force to block the lightning, but it was no use. She fell to the floor as darkness overwhelmed her. Back outside, Galaxia stood at the top of the building and observed Sailor Moon and her Senshi bounding the construction site. A sneer formed on her blood-red lips as Sailor Moon looked about for her. Finally, Pluto looked up and saw the fallen Senshi. Pluto shouted and pointed to the top of the building, "Sailor Galaxia!" Sailor Moon's twin pigtails whipped around as she looked up to her left. Her blue eyes turned liquid with sadness. "No! You can't be like that!" She ran out to the middle of the field and held her arms out. "I carried you and sealed chaos away! When are you back?" You know, I really love this plan because of how a-hole-ish it is. One of Usagi's greatest strengths is the ability to redeem and to believe in the better of people. Galaxia is using that as a weapon. How can a girl who's basically a princess of friendship herself handle something this bad? Something that's challenging her very belief. I love it. Galaxia sneered, "You could never destroy me, Sailor Moon. Like you, I am eternal!" She raised her right arm and shot out 3 rapid-fire energy bursts. The blue projectile sped towards Sailor Moon, who could only jump back in terror. Mars glanced around and half closed her eyes. "I sense others here." She looked at Sarah and Pluto. "Can you two sense anyone? Aren't you Jedi or whatever?" Sarah nodded and stretched out her own senses. She could immediately detect Mercury in the building and in pain. 8 buildings were in the building and rapidly closing in on her. However, she could also sense 9 others scattered around the construction site. "It's a trap!" she yelled. Sarah's Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune unclipped their lightsabers and activated them, while Saturn held out her right arm. A pole arm, almost a head taller than she, and topped by 2 wicked-looking blades materialized in her hand. "We have to get Ami out of there!" she said, pointing to the building. Sailor Jupiter nodded. "Leave that to me!" Before anyone could protest, she dashed across the open field and into the building. Her eyes widened as they adjusted to the darkness, but it would be a minute or 2 before she could fully see. She crept forward, jumping involuntarily at the flickering shadows. She finally adjusted to the dark. allowing her to find a completed stairwell to take her to the next floor. And the Phantom Sisters. She slid up the slide of the stairs and saw Pet standing over Sailor Mercury. Black lightning streamed from her fingertips and coursed into the genius's body. Jupiter leapt up on the second floor and shouted, "Stop that! You're killing her!" Pet's eyes rolled as he calmly turned from Mercury and looked over at Jupiter. "That's the idea." A sneer formed on Jupiter's lips. "You have no idea who you're messing with." She railed right straight, and a ball of energy formed in it. "Sparkling light pressure!" she said, lobbing the ball underhanded straight at Pets. "Eat this!" Hilda's Phantom sister only had enough time to scream before the spear hit her in the chest and exploded. Tendrils of electricity arced around Pets' body, and actually caused her skin to flash translucent and showed the skeleton beneath in certain places. Cauliflowers uncoiled her whip and cracked it at Jupiter. The leathery strand wrapped around Jupiter's right forearm. Before she could react, Cauliflowers reeled it back and pulled, causing Jupiter to lose her balance and plunge forward onto the wooden floor. And the fight was on. The Amazon trio, the Amazoness quartet, and the aliens ran to the side, rapidly outflanking the Sailor Senshi. Fisteye jumped on top of the pile of steel girders and bandaged a net of throwing steins in his scaly hands. He took aim and flung them at Sailors Venus and Neptune. Venus raised her arm and pointed at Fisteye and said, "Crescent beam!" A golden beam shot from her fingertip and hit the girders directly below Fisteye's feet, burning right through them. Fisteye jumped in the air and landed a good 10 meters away. "You'll have to try better than that," he yelled. Neptune closed her eyes and reached out with a force. She telekinetically lashed onto the merman's legs and gave them a quick tug, tripping Fisteye up and sending him to the ground. "Yes, we will do better than that." Venus flashed a toothy smile. "The bigger they are, the clumsier they are." Neptune turned her head around and looked askance at the young woman. "I thought it was different." Her danger sense flared as she looked up, seeing Ed and Allie hovering above them. The two aliens held out their hands and sent down a telekinetic shock wave. The invisible barrier hit the two Senshi, sending them flying back to the ground and eventually skating to a halt just outside the men's gate, digging a deep furrow into the ground. An inarticulate scream escaped Mars's curled lips. Her black eyes blazed as she saw her gloved hands together. "Fire!" she began. A small flame ignited on her fingertips as she finished. "Stall!" A tiny flame grew into a maelstrom, streamed from her fingers, and quickly reached Ed and Allie, engulfing the elvens in flames. They plummeted to the ground and lighted with a thud. Allie wrapped his arms around his beloved in an attempt to smother the magical flames. He was eventually able to put them out, but not before they certainly burnt the two. Ed's face was severely burned and her green skin was beginning to blister, while Allie's arms were similarly damaged. He tried to grab Ed and drag her away, but the pain was too great. Mars admired her handiwork for a moment before casting her eyes in search of new targets. She quickly spotted Hawk's Eye, standing a few feet away. The flamboyant young man blew a kiss at Mars, then held up a wooden stick with one burning end. He held it to his mouth and blew, sending a veritable inferno towards Mars. She immediately looked out of the way and was promptly tackled by an athletic-looking woman. Both ladies fell to the ground hard. Mars, however, was on the bottom. June, the eldest of the Amazoness quartet, rose to her feet and brushed the dirt on her shoulders. Like her sisters, she wore her green hair in 2 elaborate braids and had an air of confidence about her. She turned to Hawkeye and said, "Nice job!" Hawkeye merely nodded before turning back to the battle. Sailors Uranus and Pluto and Saturn quickly found themselves surrounded by the other members of the Amazoness quartet and the Amazon trio. Pala held out her hands and cut them together, before quickly pulling them apart, revealing a large blue ball.
"Yes, it's for you!"
she squealed before throwing it at the three. Saturn immediately planted her glaive in the ground and shouted, "Silence! Wall!" The ball hit the crystalline barrier and exploded, sending out a large fireball that engulfed the 3 Senshi. When it faded, all 3 stood tall behind Saturn's barrier. Uranus held her lightsaber high with her right hand and extended her left. A jewel-encrusted scimitar materialized it, as she sliced both blades down. "Double Space Sword Blaster!" she yelled. Twin crescent-shaped energy blasts up from her lightsaber and space sword, but they hit nothing as the Amazon trio and quartet members dodged the attacks. Pluto cocked an eyebrow at Uranus. new attack. The top Mario says he shrugged. I've been meaning to try it out for some time. Pluto found the sweet smile curl her lips as her alert eyes scanned the construction site. Mercury and Jupiter were still in the half-finished building, and Pluto could sense that both were still alive. Just a moment, I see a mask were trying, and the key word was trying, to fight Sailor Galaxia. Finally, Venus, Mars, and Neptune were unconscious and 10 meters away. We must retreat! We are no match for them! Saturn nodded and lowered the silence glade to solving the protective barrier. Sarah and Uranus took advantage and dashed out, hitting Pala to the ground and knocking the younger woman out. Pluto half closed her eyes and raised out with the force, sending a message to Mercury and Jupiter. Get out! We must retreat! Several minutes earlier. Jupiter hit the deck ground hard. She tried to block her fall with her free hand, but her face still impacted with the wood. Stars hissed before her eyes, and she tasted blood in her mouth. She slowly got to her feet and grabbed onto the whip with both hands. With a grunt, she pulled the whip. Calaveras' eyes went wide in shock, and Sailor Jupiter's tongue sent her flying into the wall, clear on the opposite side of the room. She crumbled to the ground upon impact, and the cape she wore fluttered around her still body. Colin and Berthier took a step back as Jupiter advanced. There was bloodlust in her pale green eyes, and the Senshi line settled into a jutsu attack stance. Please try something, she said. I'm in a bad mood. Love you, Jupiter! The younger Phantom sisters looked at each other for a moment before turning around and running as fast as they could away. Senshi scoffed. Weaklings. She walked over to Sailor Mercury, knelt down and examined her friend for any major injuries. Her pulse is good, but her breathing's a bit labored. She then grabbed Mercury and stood up, hoisting her over her shoulder in a fireman's carry. A small, niggling feeling in the back of her mind urged her to get moving. But before she could even move, the ceiling above her head shattered, scattering splinters of wood in all directions. A dozen of razor-sharp splinters hit Sailor Jupiter and Mercury. Their Senshi uniforms protected them for the most part. But a long sliver hit Jupiter in her right thigh, piercing right to the bone. She gritted her teeth in pain as it glanced through the wound. I'll not stop. I'll not stop, repeated in her head as she stumbled to the stairs leading down. A voice from behind drew her attention and stopped her tracks, however. So, the Senshi are trapped like rats in a cage. Jupiter's head turned to her right, as she twisted her waist enough so she could see the four fallen Senshi behind her. Sailor's Iron Mouse, Ten Niyako, Aluminum Siren, and Lead Crow stood there. Aluminum Siren smiled at Jupiter.
Hello! We would like you to please join Sailor Galaxia's army as we sweep across the galaxy.
Ten Niyako abruptly shoved the dits out of the way before pointing her bazooka at Mercury.
These two die!
She screamed as her finger pressed the bazooka's trigger. A long rocket shot out and flew at Jupiter, but she was already diving into the stairwell, keeping her body pressed in front of Mercury to protect her friend. The rocket exploded near the stairwell's opening. The resulting shockwave slammed into Jupiter, causing her to lose her balance and sending her tumbling down the stairs. She landed at a bomb on her right side, arm first. She heard a popping sound, and instantly pain flared up at the elbow and forearm. By now, Mercury was finally conscious. The blue-haired genius got to her foot and looked up, seeing the now destroyed stairs.
What happened?
She mumbled. A grunt from below finally caught her attention. She looked down and gasped as she saw Sailor Jupiter lying there. Her fuku was stained with dirt, and her brown hair, normally tied in a ponytail, it came loose and billowed out around her head. There was a trail of blood coming from her right thigh, but most distressing was her right arm. It was bent not only at the elbow, but in a very unnatural position. The forearm was fractured and twisted almost in half. Mercury grated her teeth and looked around for something to use as an emergency splint. Her eyes darted to the ceiling as she felt 6 people above her. She saw Iron Mouse, Aluminum Siren, Tin Crow, Tin Niyaka, Pets, and Cauliflower standing there, all hungry for blood. Mercury reached out with the force and recalled her lightsaber. It landed in her right hand and ignited, sending a sapphire counterblade forth.
This is the darkness. I am the pretty Sailor Jedi Knight, Sailor Mercury. You will not pass.
Lightcrow's mouth turned into an upward sneer, and her good arm snapped her whip. We do not intend to pass you. We simply intend to kill you. Her eyes suddenly scrunched in confusion. Wait, what's a Jedi Knight? Iron Mouse scoffed at Lead Crow's confusion and jumped down Mercury. The tiny Senshi jumped up and kicked at Mercury's head, but the genius definitely sidestepped it. Iron Mouse landed and quickly rolled back, allowing her to come up with some martial arts stance. Mercury reached out with her senses.
"Do you need to engage in hand-to-hand combat with me?"
The Iron Mouse advanced upon Mercury and threw a series of rapid punches at the Senshi of water. She effortlessly blocked each one, but had to be careful not to cut off one of Iron Mouse's limbs with her lightsaber. The minute to his Senshi quickly stopped and attempted a new technique. She dropped down or attempted a weak sleep, but Mercury could feel her do it in a full 5 seconds before she actually did it. She leapt up and somersaulted over Iron Mouse's head, while simultaneously carving the right ceiling above her and around the area her other enemies were standing. The floor, already damaged, buckling from the earlier explosion and weight, collapsed. Mercury landed and broke into a run as soon as she landed, the also body-sucking Iron Mouse out of her way. Time to see the slow to a crawl as the free fallen Senshi and 2 Phantom Sisters fell to the floor below. Mercury quickly deactivated her lightsaber, clipped it to her skirt, and called upon the Force for additional strength needed to pick Singer Jupiter up. She was hefting the Senshi of lightning up when a telepathic message entered her mind from Pluto. "Get out! We must retreat!" Mercury let a grim smile cross her face as he stepped one back.
"I know it! We're leaving now!"
She took one more look before running for the exit. Behind her, the Senshi and Phantom Sisters attempted to disentangle themselves from one another. "Get your foot out of my face!" Calvaro shouted at Tennyako. Tennyako snarled,
"Would you prefer my fist in your face, or would that ruin your makeup job?"
Calvaro slowly got to her feet and placed her hands on the small of her back. Allowing her stretch and knock out some kinks out of her back, she looked around and noted Mercury and Jupiter gone. "Oh man, Galaxia's going to kill us for sure!" Tennyako stood up and looked at her. She smiled slyly.
"Actually, it wasn't us that let these two get away."
Calvaro stepped over. "What do you mean?" Tennyako's golden eyes narrowed and flashed conspiratorially.
"Simple. Galaxia kills incompetent subordinates. If we stick together and back up,"
she motioned to her fallen comrades,
"we'll stay alive."
Calvaro let a small grin cross her face. "Interesting idea, Tennyako. Please tell me more." Sarah Mercury bursted out of the half-finished building and emerged into a war zone. Sailor Moon and Tuxedo Mask were directly in front of her and battling to possess Sailor Galaxia, while Mars, Venus, and Neptune were unconscious and piled up in a heap near half-melted girders. Uranus, Pluto, and Saturn were scattered about the construction site, fighting losing battles. Tuxedo Mask glanced over his shoulder as Sailor Mercury emerged from the building and saw Jupiter slung over her shoulder. He deflected an energy blast from Sailor Galaxia with his cane and shouted, "Ai! What happened?" The blue-haired genius met up with her friends.
"The Sailor Animates and the Phantom Sisters are inside that building there,"
she pointed out.
"What's the matter with Usagi?"
Usagi was standing next to Tuxedo Mask and had a look of stark horror on her face.
"I healed these people. They were better. Why are they attacking us?"
she mumbled. Mercury looked away from her and looked up at Galaxia. The demon, again, I have better names for her, seemed more interested in toying with the Senshi than actually destroying them. She kept her eyes on Galaxia as he spoke.
"Mamoru, get Usagi out of here!"
Tuxedo Mask nodded and scooped his beloved into his arms before turning and bounding away. Mercury followed with Jupiter still slung over her shoulder. Sailor Galaxia shouted from her perch, "Leaving so soon? The funeral's just started!" She raised her arms as her clawed hands pulsed with energy. Yellow energy blast shot out from her hands and sped towards Mercury, Moon, and Mask. Sailor Mercury's arms seemed to move on their own as she brought her lightsaber up. She skidded to a halt, leaving furrows in the ground from her knee-high boots as she gently lowered Sailor Jupiter to the ground, her left hand, while activating her lightsaber with her right. She brought her sapphire blade up and gracefully deflected away the first half-dozen energy shots, seeming to dance. Tuxedo's eyes wide as Mercury, normally considered the weakest of the Senshi, stood up to Sailor Galaxia's attack. She turned her head and suddenly shouted,
"Mamoru, why are you still here? Get Usagi out of here!"
Tuxedo Mask nodded before running for the exit. Saturn noted Mercury's emergence and sent the telepathic message to Force to Uranus and Pluto.
"Retrieve the fallen, then meet back at Makoto's apartment."
She then slashed at her opponent, Hawkeye, with her lightsaber. Hawkeye jumped back seconds before the live of her blade could slice him in half. Snarl crossed his lips as he held out his firing winded stick and exhaled, sending out a torrent of fire. Saturn merely dodged to the right, avoiding the stream of orange-yellow flame and putting her in perfect position to scoop Mars up. She quickly deactivated her lightsaber and clipped it to her skirt before scooping up Mars in a fireman's carry. The stick vanished from Hawkeye's hand, only to be replaced by a leather whip. He cracked it at Saturn, sending the diminutive Senshi of death scouring for the exit. At the very top of a crane stood Uranus with her space sword in one hand, and lightsaber in the other as he fended off a giant weed. Thick vines with studded thorns were sprouting up from the ground, tracking and grabbing at the tomboyish Senshi while she slashed. At the bottom of the crane stood a young woman in a red dress with flame red hair tied in 2 elaborate braids. She was Sarah, member of the Amazoness Quartet and master of plants. She held out her arms, and another vine shot forth from the dirt. Uranus snarled and slashed at the vines, but for every one she cut, 2 more sprung out to attack her. Sarah spoke. "Give up, fool! It's impossible to defeat my plants!" Uranus' snarl turned into a grim smile at Sarah's words. "For a Jedi Knight, impossible is a word that doesn't exist." She crossed her swords in front of her chest and concentrated, building up energy in 2 blades. "Double space sword blaster!" she yelled, dropping them down and slinging a cross-seed energy blast at the ground and at the root of the vines. Sarah let out a shriek at the impact, and subsequent explosion flung her back and her plant was disintegrated. The crane was lifted off its tracks before settling back down with a loud thud. Uranus had already let off the crane's arm and landed to the ground some meters away. She used the force to lessen the impact, but she still felt a bit jarred at it. Uranus rolled to her right and scooped up before glancing to her left, seeing Neptune's and Venus lying there. She sprinted over, deactivated her lightsaber, and clipped it to her skirt. She clipped her space sword to her skirt as well, and scooped up Sailor Neptune in her arms before running to the exit. Finally, Sailor Pluto ran to Venus and picked her up. Suddenly her dangerous head flows. She went to the half-finished building as 8 very powerful women emerged from it, the Sailor Animates and Phantom Sisters. She raised her time staff high and shouted, "Dark Dome close!" A crystalline-looking energy barrier formed around her, and Sailor Venus mere seconds away before energy attacks, 2 magic whips, and a rocket hit her precision. She raised her free hand and reached out with the force, sending a telekinetic wave at them and flinging them away. Pluto took one more look before fleeing with the injured Senshi. Sarah Mercury noted everyone's departure. She sent a message through the force.
"I'll be right behind you. Stay safe, everyone."
She looked up at Galaxia, still standing on top of the building with her clawed hands planted on her scared hips. "Your time is over, Mizuno Ami. The galaxy shall fall to chaos!" Mercury held her lightsaber high and yelled,
"No! You will never triumph chaos! The Force is with us, and the light shall never be eclipsed by your darkness!"
Galaxia's purse, and her reptilian eyes narrowed in confusion. "What is this Force you speak of?" Mercury's eyes suddenly realized she said too much. That the melted probe coming from Galaxia. She concentrated on deflecting the probe, but it was difficult. Sweat formed on her forehead, but she successfully deflected the mental invasion. She bent down and picked Jupiter back up. Mercury ran for the exit, but found it blocked by debris. She called upon the Force and, about 10 meters from the debris and detritus separating the construction site from the rest of the warehouse district, she leapt into the sky. Iron Mouse's and Hawkeye's mouth dropped and opened and shot, with aluminum siren cut rather giddily. Mercury landed with a loud thud on the pavement. Legs dropped, but she paid no attention to the pain as she ran with all her might. 10 minutes later, she stood in front of Jupiter's apartment. Burnett was still unconscious, but her breathing and pulse were steady. Mercury let out a long-held sigh as she went into the side of the building. Makoto owned a bakery that took up the whole first floor, and her apartment took up the whole second floor. She found the fire escape and double-timed it, reaching the second apartment in seconds. Senshi and Wire entered through a window and was in the living room. Everyone was already there in the civilian identities. Ruka ran over and took Jupiter from Mercury. "We got Makoto's bedroom set up as a makeshift hospital." Mercury nodded.
"I'll take everyone out in a second."
A bright light suddenly engulfed her, and when it faded, Sarah Mercury was gone, and Amy Mizuno was in place.